or shift to the public part of our task force meeting. And there are, I'm sorry? We good? Okay. So there are a couple of things that I want to share with you in terms of an update. What we did at our first convening was we shared the work that our child care, the DHS Child Care Division, has been laboring through for a couple of years now. And our rationale in doing that was to level set, okay? To let all of us know sort of what the landscape looks like. It was not our intention and is not our intention for that presentation to be restrictive or exclusionary, okay? It was simply to, as I said, sort of lay out the waterfront for the kinds of things, the things that this task force is going to need to be engaged in, okay? We are not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that that was the gospel according to DHS, okay? It is the way that we have been engaging the process and the elements of the things that we are going to have to think about. Today we have a couple of action items that we're going to need to sift through. First is we will need to select the first and second vice chair for our convening. And secondly, we had a lot of discussion here about a request for proposal for a consultant that will support the work of the board. Okay. We will ultimately need to evaluate proposals for that consultant. What we want to do is to have two members of this board support a three-person DHS team in that evaluation process. And so we want to select the two members from the task force that will work with the DHS team to make the determination of who amongst the respondents will we then share that work with. And so if I could turn at this moment to our Deputy Commissioner for Operations, Melissa Hucks, to give us an update on that procurement process. Melissa.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Have some very good updates from our last meeting on where we're at with this process. So as you know, we are working an express RFP process. So what that does is it does reduce the timeline that respondents can turn in bids, but it also allows us to move through the process swiftly to get this out to bid to meet the deadlines of the legislation. So we were able to get through our office, and with help with the development of the scope with Jude and her team, swiftly and efficiently. So the RFP review is with CPO's office. We're waiting hopefully today to hear from Comptroller on their approval, and once we receive that, we will be on or about 30 days from the RFP hitting the streets. So Thanksgiving, on or about Thanksgiving, is when that will happen. As the commissioner said, we did receive approval from the Comptroller's office for a rule exception to allow non-state employees to participate with our team to evaluate the bids. Just for those of you who have never participated in that process before, is bids will come in. There's a technical type of evaluation, reviewing what they've submitted, and then a cost evaluation. We will do training with the individuals of this team before those bids were to come in. You will work together as a team to evaluate and make recommendations back to who the selection of the RFP would be. So that it's I don't want to simplify it and make it basic because there is work and depending on the volume that comes in, but understanding the context of what the mission of the consultant is very important to make sure you can evaluate. And then I'll echo what was talked about earlier. Conflict of interest and other things also would need to be weighed into who would evaluate the bids as they come in, because that potentially could remove you from that process. Commissioner?
Melissa, thanks so much for that. And just a further admonition about process. While Jen is 1,000% right in people can file any kind of protest they choose to, okay? And while at the end of the day, the protest may not be sustained, it stops our process while that's in motion, okay? And so we are already, the very best we're gonna be able to do is to secure this consultant 3 months into our deliberations, okay? If something fouls that process up, that can push that back. Okay? So again, we just want to be careful to not do anything to breach that process. So next part of our agenda is.
Before we leave that.
I'm sorry, please. Go, Brooke.
A question about the timeline and process for that, for the scope, if that's all right. So around Thanksgiving, just before Thanksgiving, is kind of target date for when the RFP gets posted or put out for bid.
Mm-hmm.
And then can we just speak to a minute, what do we think about in terms of a task force, in terms of timing for when those are due in, when the review process might take place, and then, and just a point of clarification, the small team of members of this task force and DHS would then make a recommendation to this larger task force to adopt. Is that right? It's the task force itself that has to adopt the recommendation?
Yeah, but similar to T-Rate. If you don't sign off, we'd have to go through.
Correct. So just to echo what Suzanne and I were sidebarring on, is the recommendation would come back to the board. If the board accepts, we would move forward with issuing that contract. If the board does not, we would either go to the second bid or we would have to start that process back over. So to answer the last question first, in regard to timeline, so once we receive approval today, I'd be able to confirm that, but I'm waiting on comptroller to tell us what that timeline is for it to be out for bid. Once it goes out to bid, let's say Thanksgiving, and it's a 3-week turnaround, when it comes back in, we would immediately convene the team of 5, because it would need to be the odd number as we discussed. Depending on your timeframes, that we would set 1 week to review the bids, 2 weeks to review the bids. We would agree in whole. That would then dictate that piece in regard to presenting back to the board. My expectation and hope is that the timing would work out for, I don't know if board meetings have been scheduled out that far into January and February, but that we would match that timeline up so that the presentation, we're not holding any information for 3 to 4 weeks before the next board meeting. We would be able to get the consultant recommended to the board, approved by the board, and have an executed contract to begin work.
That makes sense, and there's that, I'm just looking, y'all, thank you for getting that schedule out ahead of time, getting us all scheduled through the end of 2022. That was super helpful, so appreciate whoever did that. And then I'm just looking, it looks like January 20th is our January board meeting, so it seems like maybe that's a reasonable target for that presentation.
We will be very hopeful, yes. Yes, we're going to be working, as we've discussed, we are trying to be efficient through it, but not cut corners or circumvent any processes, but to be able to hit this February 1st award date.
And folks, know that, and Melissa used exactly the right language. We are hopeful of being in that kind of time frame. What you learn early on in government is to try to underpromise and overdeliver, okay? Sticking to or creating rigid timelines is seldom smart, because there's always a hiccup in something, okay? It is our intention to be able to have that recommendation in that January board timeframe. That might slip. We will keep the board informed so you understand our movement, but I think we are loath to set hard deadlines for things that we don't completely control. So,
No, just to echo Commissioner, the goal today would be to leave with those two names to serve. That way we are prepared as we get that timeline defined to be able to communicate and prep for that evaluation period and not lose any steam moving forward.
That's great. And is there, sorry, just a number of questions around this. Let's talk a little bit about sort of candidates for who might be applying and how, if this group has ideas or knows candidates that they want to encourage to apply for the RFP, how would we best handle that in an open records way, open meeting, just candidly, but encourage, certainly we want as many qualified applicants to apply as possible, and maybe that's something, maybe we submit the ideas through the team, through the DHS team as part of the outreach, but there may be some, or maybe we're just encouraging folks to apply. Is there any considerations around that?
So the first thing is that the request for proposal will clearly delineate the eligible applicants, okay? And within the context of those eligible applicants, there's certain, I don't know that we would run afoul of anything by encouraging application.
I think outreach needs to wait until the RFP is public, and then we'll have probably information. I don't know what the typical process is, if we do a press release or if we have links or something like that. But once it's actually out on the street, then, and I think we've had this discussion in another board meeting, certainly board members can acknowledge or promote the idea that that's out there. What I would discourage you from doing, though, is having any discussions about what the board is looking for, about what would be a good thing to put in the application. You just don't want to get involved in that. As far as just publicizing the opportunity, I'm sure there'll be a strategy around that, but we'll want to do that after it's public and hits the street. One of the things you're looking for in procurement process is symmetry in the information that any potential bidder is going to get. So side conversations or things like that, if any happen, let us know, because what we might need to do is make sure we're having the same conversation with every bidder, so they have all the same information all the time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it sounds like that makes a lot of sense.
And if I could just add just something, I love what Janet said about perception being reality. We have to be very mindful of the perception. Like if I reach out to someone and say, hey, we have this RFP, and you do that in such a way, it could be misconstrued that they have an end. So we have to be extremely mindful and just be cautious of that. It's, once it's out, it's out. And so I just wanted to just make sure that we really, that's a sticky thing to think about, but it is something of a reality base.
So I do. So anything that goes out for bid in state government is visible and can be pushed forward. And I'll echo what Chris Sands said, is once it's out there, to push it forward. I will also echo, though, what Sherelle and Chris Sands said. I think as board members, as we discussed earlier, providing guidance for those entities in that bid need to be refrained from. And if you are the individual that is selected today to sit on the evaluation, any communication with them could skew how that reviews happen, remove you from it, or potentially harm that applicant in their proposal that comes in. So you want to make sure that they have a honest and clean chance to put together their proposal and to go through that process without any noise, direction, or guidance coming from anyone on the board.
Yes, sir, Commissioner. Just a question, clarification around the RFP. So obviously you all crafted that, I assume, along the lines that was prescribed within the legislation that's now law. That will be made public to us when it's made public to the rest of the folks as well. Okay, I just, judging whether I would be a good person to sit on that or not knowing what I'm gonna be evaluating, other than what my was cared for on this task force, my job on here, would be a little bit difficult, but, I'll just have to weigh that in on whether I would be a good person to serve on that or not.
So just to verbalize what we were nodding on, the full proposal would not be visible until it does hit the streets. It has to go through all the review and approval processes, CPO, comptroller, and internally. I don't know if anyone, it will, I don't think we can talk about the scope. Christine, I'm looking at you. It will match what the charge is, but as soon as that becomes available, it will be made public and shared from there.
Yeah, since the scope is pretty much following along the legislation, I think what you all are empowered to do is to think about and discuss in more general terms what you need and want this consultant to do. The scope is not particularly detailed. I would be surprised if we did something different on this one. It's not particularly detailed. It's not a check the box, you have to be able to do this. There are gonna be some technical requirements any bidder has to meet, but other than that, we're looking to evaluate how well the bid is gonna meet the purpose behind what we need. And so, to evaluate the RFP is really, and I think that's some of the training that Melissa's talking about, is we'll get them in, we'll look at how we want to approach the evaluation, the people who are selected will get trained, and everybody will be on the same page about how they're approaching it. So I think that's very, very easy to remedy, and it shouldn't be anything too foreign or difficult when you look at it.
And I would argue that if every individual that has been appointed to this task force, I would say has the street cred to be part of the evaluation process. So that's what's, your work in this space, I think validates your credentials to do the work of choosing a consultant that's gonna help us in this space. So I would ask you not to be overly concerned about that. Okay.
One last comment to that point. It's a good one, and I just was thinking about, if we're gonna try to end this meeting with two folks appointed here, I would love for us just to have a quick conversation about how do we make sure that the thinking of everyone on this task force is informing that deliberation and that recommendation. I think there's a process by which we could do, perhaps along the lines of what you were just saying, is really, let's hear from everyone, what's important, based on your experience with consultants, what are the key things that you would be looking for? What are the main roles and functions they're gonna need to play? Are we gonna have working groups that are divvied up? Well, those consultants need to also, in addition to supporting this group, support working groups. And what kind of data will they be needing to be pulling? To me, that is gonna, I don't wanna say make or break, but that's gonna have a big impact on the quality of the work we do together. And I think that for us to be able to really draw on everyone's experience here and have some conversation facilitated or, written or whatever it may be, that's, shared in open meeting, I think that would be really helpful.
I think the way that I had intended to go about this is to, when we get to it, to ask for nominations, and then open the question to the nomination. So you have a nomination that's moved and seconded, and then ask, is there any discussion attendant to that nomination? And so it was my sense that at that point in time, that process that you're talking about, we could engage in.
Makes sense, thank you.
Okey-doke. Okay. Melissa, thanks an awful lot. Let's move on. Okay. One of our important partners in this child care task force work is our Economic Development Commission. And so we wanted to ask them to share with the task force the perspective of ECD and this issue of child care. And Brooksy Carlton and Ken Archer are gonna share that with us. Brooksy, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Thank you. We're going to switch it up a little bit. I'm Brooksy Carlton, Assistant Commissioner for Rural Development, and then Jamie Stitt, who is on your task force, is going to talk a little bit about the business development perspective. So it's good to be with y'all today. childcare is not something that ECD has traditionally been involved in. But even before COVID, we started hearing from a lot of our partners in our rural communities saying they didn't have any licensed childcare facilities, or they had some, but they didn't have anything for second shift or third shift workers. And so they had started asking us if there was anything we could do to help. And then COVID happened, and that's all we heard. And then kind of coming out of COVID a little bit during September, we did some listening sessions across the state. Our team went to 11 communities, invited mayors and other local government officials to those, had about 400 people attend those sessions, and we just asked them, what are you struggling with right now? And workforce development was big, and probably right underneath workforce development was daycare. And same issue, there's even fewer options now, that there are people that could go back to work if they had daycare options. I think you heard it on the news just as much as we heard the real life stories in our communities. So, the Rural Development Division said, okay, again, not something that we've ever done before, but let's see what we can do. So I'm just going to tell you really quickly about a funding opportunity that we have, and then Jamie can tell you a little bit more about the business development perspective with daycare. So we have a federal program called Community Development Block Grant Program, and traditionally we have funded water and sewer improvements in our communities. It's been a great program, but now there's a lot of money out there for water and sewer. So, and we also have some CDBG COVID recovery money. So we said, what are some new things that are needed? What can help us recover from COVID? And the daycare conversation came to mind. So we have been in a great partnership with a team from DHS to talk about, where their funds are going, where do they have gaps in funding, where can we maybe fill in? And it just turned out to work out really perfectly. DHS has funding for operations and startup costs and things like that. Our funding is not great for that, but our funding can go to facility improvements, and that was something that just really met a need. So we are proposing to use $10 million of our coronavirus recovery money through the CDBG program to kind of do a pilot program. We have $9 million that we're going to partner with the local development districts. So there are 9 development districts across the state. We're going to partner with them, kind of give them a formula allocation, say this is how much we have available for you to do childcare projects. We are partnering with DHS, so they will be able to tell people who are going through their licensure program, once they get to kind of a certain point in their licensure program, hey, there's a grant available for facilities if you need that. And then kind of vice versa, we have the really good contacts with the local governments who, when somebody comes in and says, I would start a daycare, but there are too many rules, then they can say, here's how DHS and ECD can help you with that. So we are letting those local development districts kind of set the rules about how many grants they're going to do, if they're going to focus on just 1 or 2 communities for this pilot project, what their maximum grant amount is going to be, if they're going to focus on the in-home daycares or if they're going to focus on the facilities, and just kind of let the locals guide the process. But there will be grants all across the state for that. Again, we're targeting facility rehabs or rehab of a home or work on a home. We could also do equipment purchases, and we can do acquisition of buildings. So if a daycare facility says, there's this closed down daycare facility, and if we could purchase it, then we could open it back up. So we will do acquisition as well. New construction, honestly, we just don't have time to do that with this funding because it has to be expended by 2023. So it's a great program. We're really excited about it. Hope to have it rolled out in the next couple of weeks, but I feel like we have been saying that for a month, 2 months, 3 months. And then we have, so that's $9 million. That's the vast majority of our funding. And then we have another program that's $1 million, and we're doing 2 pilot projects with that. And those are projects that have either come to DHS or have come to us and said, we've got to figure this out. One of them is an industry that's trying to hire about 1,500 people and said, we know we can't hire that many people unless we offer some daycare facilities on our property to allow our employees to use that. And the other one is a community that surveyed people in their community and said, why are you not working? And 2 of the 3 top responses were related to childcare, access to and affordability of childcare. And so that economic developer in that community said, I have to address this. That's the only way that I'm gonna fill these open positions in my industries, in my community. So we're doing 2 $500,000 pilot projects with those groups to hopefully, establish daycare facilities and just make sure we can do that and we can figure out how to work together on that. And then our grand plan is that we will use our CDBG annual allocation to keep these programs going and to grow these programs. So this one, to kind of kick us off and see how it works, see what the need is out there, how we can partner to meet those needs, and then we will use ongoing funding to continue the program. So it's something that is new to us. This partnership is new to us, but has been very rewarding already. And it is something that we really felt we had to do to be responsive to our communities. That's what they asked for. So that is why we kind of put this in place. So happy to answer any questions about that or send you information once we get that out in the next couple of weeks. And then Jamie, if you want to touch on kind of the business development side of why we're looking at daycare.
Does anybody have any questions for Brooksy before I talk about? Well, let's go around the room.
Knew I wasn't getting all crazy.
Thank you, Commissioner. Brooksy, are you at liberty to disclose or identify, for those 2 $500,000 grants, who were the parties involved?
Not yet. But we will be soon, but it's an industry that kind of came to us confidentially and said, we have this problem, so, and then a community, same way, but we will.
Okay. By way of disclosure, the reason I'm asking is I'm kind of wondering if, one of the, if the industry that's involved in one of those is somebody that's affiliated with my own organization.
Okay.
So if so, I'd want to know, just so I could have bright lines and know what I'm supposed to do, what I'm not supposed to do when talking about that kind of business. All right.
So thank you for that information as well. That is really exciting. I'm curious in terms of the long-term plan. I know you mentioned that your CDBG allocation would go to sustain this kind of effort. Do you all have a sense of the large market demand for it and how you might, not necessarily evenly, but equitably distribute these kinds of grants or these kinds of supports with a state that has so much supply?
And that's kind of the reason, part of the reason we're doing the pilot program is to see, do we get a ton of applications? I mean, one thing to keep in mind about this funding is that it's federal funding. DHS deals with that a lot, but daycares don't deal with that a lot. It's going to have a lot of rules. It's going to have some burdens that come with implementing federal funds. So we've got to figure out if this funding matches, if we can work out all of the federal rules and regulations that apply and make it helpful to daycare facilities and in-home daycares. So I think part of it is the pilot is to figure out how it works, and second, to figure out what the demand is. If there is going to be, because the purpose is not just to rehab a current daycare facility, it's to rehab a facility so that they can add capacity. So we want to really use this to grow the capacity of the daycare facilities across the state. So did you have another question that I didn't address? Okay.
Yeah, so in line with that, do you include technical assistance to help them assess not just like their physical capacity, but also like what scaling might look like in terms of the learning curve strain or the growing pains of adding capacity for them?
That is where our partnership with DHS comes in. We are really good at doing construction projects. They are really good at, they have a business development program that y'all can speak to. They have all kinds of things in place that will help with that side of it.
Right,
We're not going to do any projects that DHS is not involved in.
That is a huge part of our strategy, our business strategy, is the technical assistance piece. And you couldn't have two finer people really leading that charge as with Gwen and Jude. So I don't know if y'all want to kind of speak a little bit more to the technical assistance aspect.
So we've been very intentional over the past several months in creating a unit that speaks specifically to developing childcare and new agencies that want to onboard. And part of that is through our pre-licensure unit that launched in August. And so through that program, we have a unit of individuals who are focused on building a strong foundation for early child care providers who are wanting to open business, because we know that a love of children is wonderful, but it's also a business. And so we want to make certain that they do have that strong business background and foundation when they're opening, so that they are sustainable and they're there a year from now, 2 years from now. And so part of that process in evaluation, of course, it starts with the inquiry stage. They go through that process. We engage with them through this team and talk to them about the different steps and the requirements, so that they have a full understanding of that. And they also go through a business academy, and that's part of that pre-licensure process. And it's focused specific to child care. And once they graduate from that, then they can progress on through the process to open. And so, of course, we're engaging with fire, environmental, all those different inspections that occur within the facility just for the building, the facility itself, and then the training pieces, the business aspects for that owner to make certain that they're putting in place what's necessary to be a strong entity.
So would there be, I appreciate that. Would there be technical assistance for folks who might be at the more intermediate or advanced stages but are dealing with like chronic systemic issues? Like we have a lot of folks who struggle with retention, the cost of attrition, the cultivating a healthy workspace.
Yes, and so that has been something else that we have been strengthening over the past few years, because we do know that with the childcare industry, that has been one of their biggest struggles, is that staff retention. And so we have launched some other initiatives that help support staffing retention. Part of that is our partnership with CCR&R through the wages program. And that's a supplement that can be awarded to an individual who is enrolled in pursuing their education. And also, one of the requirements is that they stay with that entity, and they receive that supplement. And of course, we did beef it up this year by 50%, and then we also increased the wage per hour criteria for that one. So that's one aspect of it. We're also looking at other strategies, and part of that with our partnership with CCR&R is also to make certain that we have coaches that can go into those facilities and help with those agencies specifically on staff retention. And that part of that too is that business acumen, helping to develop that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You had a thought, please.
Thank you, Brooksy, ECD, for trying to address or, come to the table on this issue. I would just challenge, I guess, you and other state agencies to think real broadly when you think about childcare. There are those that are licensed by the Department of Human Services, but there's others that are licensed by the Department of Education. And anytime I get around a table of childcare providers, it's always, well, where are you licensed and what can you take advantage of, what can you not take advantage of? When you start drawing those lines, it starts eliminating a lot of players all across the state. So I think as broad as you can be, I know there's limitations around federal funding, but as broad as you can make that, so that organizations who may have a long track record of being successful across the state in providing childcare can have a seat at the table. I think then all communities can rise, because in one community it may be Department of Education license driven, the other it may be DHS, and others there's nothing. And so whenever you start drawing those lines in the sand, it makes it more difficult for some individuals to be able to take advantage of some really great programs like wages that was just mentioned. So.
Yeah, I'll just add that we are also kind of a separate but related effort with DHS, or working with like the community colleges and TBR institutions to see what their needs are and how we can meet those needs. And so we're doing some other things as well outside of this program, but thanks.
And I would add that is absolutely the reason that this task force exists. It is because, yes, if you would consider the work that DHS does in the child care space, if you would consider that the sort of, foundation of what happens in Tennessee, it is not near the all of. And so the whole idea of this task force was to have that comprehensive approach. And I will tell you that I start off a number of presentations that I do with a very disturbing chart of all of the programs that the federal government authorizes to serve those that are economically, socially, and developmentally challenged, okay? And at the center of that chart is, it tells us that we expend $1 trillion a year in those more than 80 programs. But the problem is we operate those programs all in their own little orbit, as if that's the only thing. Well, this collaboration here is a perfect example of making the whole greater than the sum of its parts. Our child care and development money, the law does not allow you to expend it on anything bricks and mortar related, okay? But that's what ECD does, okay? And so you blend those two. And so the whole immediately becomes greater than the sum of its parts. That's what we have to do around this broad issue of childcare, connect all the dots so that we make the whole greater than the sum of its parts.
Okay, so,
Bill, did you have a thought?
Are you working, I know chambers of commerce are really involved in our area certainly, and I'm on a Chamber of Commerce task force on the federal level too. Are they also partnering, or are they part of this initiative and conversation?
Yes, they were definitely part of the listening sessions that we did, and so they know about this, and, yeah, we'll use them also to get the word out.
So I really appreciate you talking about eliminating silos in essence, and I'm curious to know, and I recognize the gravity of my ask, but I'm curious to know, is there a way we can receive some sort of, even if it's high-level inventory around what resources we might be able to activate in our larger planning work? Because I think that kind of, I don't want to just say it's piecing together, but pulling from different departments can help comprehensively support this industry. And I'll let you know, my bias is that in working in childcare, the biggest issues we have are all chronic and systemic. So when addressing them, I think getting rid of siloed programming efforts and figuring out how to structurally reframe the industry would help magnificently. So partnerships like this, I think, are awesome.
And if you spent time reading the white paper that we provided, you would notice that there is a part in there where we identified a third party in which we engage with, along with the Department of Education, early, in the latter part of the last administration because of this reason. And I thank Misty for being there, Jude in her prior role, and then in her new role, which you may not know about A.C. White, is that she used to be the executive director for the Children's Cabinet under the former governor, came with a wealth of information, and we actually had collaboratively had a third party come in and do just that. Because one of the biggest challenges that we faced was the fact that you had our licensure people come into a child care, then you had DOE came in, and then guess what? The local fire departments came in. I mean, so you had so many different people coming in, and then you had a new set of federal regulations that come in to say we don't call it daycare anymore. It is child care, and it's about the earliest experience for the child in an educational setting. So we would like for our people to have a certain educational criteria, but yet the money did not follow that narrative, that directive. So Tennessee, I think, was at the forefront of a lot of states in looking at how do we break down the silos. The P20 data was also something that I think that could be leveraged to look at all of this. It's just where do you go to get it? And I think for us, the first step was the white paper. You can have access to the policy equity, that's public record, but there were some really good things in there that they also talked about, and that some of them that we have already initiated in our transformation plan.
And I think it might be helpful if at one of our next couple of convenings of our task force is if we would lay out some kind of almost heat map around what are the potential sources that are available for us, okay? Again, if we're trying to get an enterprise view, then it would be helpful to sort of lay all those out. So we'll work to.
Thank you. That's what I was asking for. I appreciate it.
Okay,
And
please.
Commissioner, I'm glad you went there because my version of what you just said was I wanted to voice the thought that I think exactly that is something that we need to keep in mind when we're selecting a consultant, because I think it's exactly that type of thing that it can, instance where we need a consultant that's skilled at identifying that macro landscape of, what is the, you called it at an enterprise level. I think that's a terrific way to capture the fact that there are, not only on a state agency level, but an industry level, there's a kind of a constellation of sorts out there, and I think it would really help this task force. Some of us are very steeped in this, some of us aren't, and some of us come at it from different facets. It would be very helpful to have the consultant be able to give that, sort of do a mapping exercise and help us see how all those parts, A, fit together or don't fit together today, and B, get a view of how they should fit together, and that's where we get toward, I think, the recommendation part, which is like the thing that we need to get delivered by next December 31st.
I think we can certainly provide a framework of that at our next meeting, and that be part of then how we charge one of the deliverables from the consultant team when we have them on board.
And real quick, I want to get one other thing on the record. Somebody mentioned the sort of the labor supply and the way in which TBR and THEC may or may not, to what degree are they supporting that? We don't, that's not represented right here today. That's something in talking with my own people from the broader business community, they identified as a concern, wanting to know more about, how many child development certificates are being supported or produced, if you will, by, say the TCATs or the community colleges. And so I wanted to put that out there as another thing that we could potentially have on a future agenda is maybe we can, I don't know if it's allowable, but, maybe invite TBR or THEC to come in and kind of provide some perspective from somebody who's knowledgeable about,
Yeah.
They can go down to the county level that you can look at whatever you want, like giving you on any occupation that you want, the supply of it coming in and the demand for the job. So that's easily accessible to point you to, so.
And we have been involved with Chancellor Tidings at TBR already. She is very much biting at the bits to work in the area of childcare, which she has really talked to us about is one of the #1 reasons why people do not stay at a TCAT or a 2-year is because of lack of quality childcare. So she is engaged already, and I think that there's many more opportunities for us to do that.
And everybody should know that one of the most significant powers that government has is the ability to convene. We can bring anybody here to share with us what it is that they are doing in this space as it relates to what it is that we're doing. So all we need to do is know what we want, and then we can certainly reach out and ask anybody to come and present. Okay?
Are you ready for me to talk about business side? Or
I'm sorry,
do you wanna
yes.
move on? No. Or do we want to move on? I really don't, we've touched on a lot of stuff, but just to share with you all, There's a whole host of reasons why companies are unsuccessful or successful in the recruitment of or the retention of talent. A lot of companies will do surveys. Some companies necessarily won't or haven't, or for whatever reason. I actually, and this isn't something I talked with Brooksy and Ken about prior to this, because it's something that just happened recent and something we're getting your department involved with, Commissioner. But there's a company in a very rural area that they are in their 4th year of their expansion. They've been here for a while. In the first 3 years, they hired 68 people, and then this last year, they lost 70. So so now they're at -2. And it's a automotive supplier, like I said, in a very distressed area. So we're gonna go in there, invite Commissioner McCord's team, or your team's already been involved in some conversations, but bringing them in again to talk with them some more, figure out what's going on with the surveys. Companies have to be innovative and creative today, more so than they have ever been. People aren't as loyal to their companies as they once were. We can see that in our own environments. We can see that when we're watching professional sports. No longer do you have an athlete that stays with the one team, whatever it may be, and that's the same here. So people have to be super innovative and creative on how they retain. What I was sharing with Brooksy and Kent was like the Walmart distribution operation down in Shelbyville, at least when I was regional director down there, so it's been a little while, had a gaming room in their lobby area dedicated for their employees. So their employees could come in and play cards with their coworkers. They could utilize the gaming system that's in there, or play any arcade games. I know that has nothing to do with daycare or any of that nature, but when that distribution operation implemented that room or added that room in there, took out a meeting room and added that room, their ability to get employees to work on time was significant. So just being innovative and creative. There's another company that went from a 3-shift operation to a 4-shift operation. This specific company that's having stresses, they're at a 4-shift operation. That may work for this other company that I just mentioned, but it's not necessarily working for this company. It's just different cultures and different needs and different stresses, and childcare may be that stress. But we're gonna ask the company to please survey their current employees that they have to see what would help them with being able to maintain that position. And if they can survey the 70 people that have left. I know this past year and a half has added stresses to us that we have never experienced in the past, and daycare obviously is a significant stress. People are not comfortable with sending their kids. My kids are in middle school, but I didn't want another person in my house with them just to increase their chances of getting, if I had somebody driving them to or from, or even whatever. So obviously we have the flexibility of working from home, so that helped, and then riding the bus, whatever. Anyways, but those are stresses that they haven't experienced in the past. It's been now a couple of years ago, but I was talking to a consultant at an event that we had, and he was telling me about, and this is another state, not in the state of Tennessee, so I don't know what the rules pertain to here, so this may not be something we can do. I'm not really for sure, but he said that he had a call center company that landed and located in a community just down the street from another call center operation. And that call center operation was paying $1 to $2 less than the other call center operation, and they were able to hire their employees like that without a problem. It's like, how in the world are you paying? And call center employees, it depends on what they're doing. If it's something that is high tech and they have to have a lot of knowledge, like medical or whatever, but if they're not, that's like a $12 to $14 an hour, and then they ramp up after their training time period. So if this company was paying like $10 to $12, and I don't know what the market demand was, I don't even know what city or market they were in, but they were able to pay less and recruit the talent that they needed because they put a daycare in their operation. Manufacturing operations cannot do that, obviously. You can't even really have something in an industrial park. Maybe, I don't know. But, something in close proximity, there's some manufacturing operations that'll put a clinic in there so that the families can use. And I'm going beyond the daycare, the child care scenario. But there's a lot of factors, and childcare is 100% a huge factor in whether or not people can work today or feel comfortable going to work, and if they feel comfortable having somebody that they're comfortable with taking care of their child. And as it relates to this other example, if we find out that it's childcare, we'll definitely let you all know and figure out how we can resolve that. Work with Brooksy and Jude and whomever else that we need to connect those dots. But any more companies, and not just manufacturing, not just back office, headquarters, call centers, data centers, I mean, even daycares, you got to be innovative and creative. You got to be innovative and creative to retain the talent you have. I was just talking to one of our workforce team members that reports to me, and she was saying that a company, they had just done a survey, and the employees wanted a little bit more flexibility. So if they had a doctor's appointment, they wanted to be able to go to that doctor's appointment without having to take that time off.
Right.
And if you're working like a 7 or 8 hours, okay, I will make that time up, but just allow me to go do that. Allow me to go take my child to the doctor or whatever else. I will respect you, you know. So, I mean, I think the same holds true in the daycare industry, just without abusing it. Obviously, there are people out there that are going to abuse it, but if we can show some flexibility and be innovative and creative in where the location of the facility is would also be helpful. Convenience is huge. Even in neighborhoods, I think one of our, and I'm sure there's multiple, but I know one of our former employees that worked with us, there was a daycare in his subdivision. I was like, oh, that would be so nice to have that convenience. But anyways, that's my perspective from a business side of things. Mr. McCord?
Yeah, and I think Patrick can speak to this even better than I can, but daycare has become a business need for the private sector. And so that makes it a great time for us to be sitting here talking about this, because it's not altruism, it's not being a nice guy, which usually lasts to the next management change. It's our gal, or usually I had to make sure, next management change, it's solving a business need. And it really gets to a good time for us to be sitting around the table trying to get some momentum and figure this thing out.
Okay. I'm sorry, did I miss somebody? Patrick, please, I'm sorry.
Just one thing to add, I heard the word innovation when Jamie was speaking, and I was very glad to hear that. I want to kind of take that opportunity to plant a seed, and that seed in the innovation bucket, something I hope this task force will consider and maybe grapple with, is something that, in talking with our own members across the state, has sort of surfaced in the last month or two, and that is the notion that, particularly for rural areas where employers are a little bit more dispersed, and that would typically make on-site childcare, which is one of the solutions, certainly not the only one, would sort of frustrate that. The idea of innovative business models such as childcare consortiums, where you had a multi-employer consortium and had multiple employers supporting a single site that was either sited at one of them or at some neutral third-party location or something, is an idea that, as I have been thinking about it and talking about it with some of my members, seems to hold a lot of promise and might be part of the solution. I just wanted to kind of put that on I think we should talk about that in the months to come.
Can I ask a question? And I'm not trying to move on, but have we ever thought about, or maybe this is a horrible idea, putting a daycare in the Tennessee Tower or in one of the state facilities? I mean, I don't need it, obviously, but.
There was state legislation this year authorizing that.
Oh, there was? I am so in tune with what's going on.
It did. It passed. It was enacted. It was Sarah Call, Senator.
Thank you. I'm so glad I came up with that
Sarah
idea.
Call, and I'm blanking on Representative Tom.
Representative
Leatherwood.
Leatherwood. So actually, and that wasn't actually something we needed legislation to do. We've always been able to do it. There just hasn't been a lot of interest from state agencies. There actually used to be a State of Tennessee Child Care. I don't remember what building it was. Was it in the town? On 2nd Avenue. But the passage of this bill has sparked some conversation, and we have actually already had conversations both within DHS and with a couple other state agencies about exploring those possibilities. So hopefully we have something to share with you guys soon. Yeah, if ECD wants to call me too, let me know and we'll get you guys on the list.
That's it. That's it. That's it. Phil, please.
Well, Commissioner, you and I served on a panel a couple of weeks ago at the Tennessee Association of Children's Early Ed Conference, and I shared one of the innovations that we were doing in that when Dr. Jesse is they start their family, and they have a child, and they can't find child care, so they have to choose between teaching and being a mother, so they go home and take care of their child. He said, I had a principal just turn in her resignation, and I tore it up and said, what can I do? And she said, well, if you'll do a child care in the school where I'm principal, then I'll stay. And so he told her to go ahead, and then the board told him he couldn't do it. And insurance said you can't do it. So he said, but I think I can contract. Will you contract it? I said, sure. And so we started one at Normal Park, and then one at Soddy, and now one at Daisy, and then one at Middle Valley, and one at Ottawa, and one at Appleton. So we have 12 schools now to where we have licensed as a family group, home, so we take 12 children. And in those schools where we have those programs, the turnover rate of new teachers is single digit and sometimes zero. But that's the type of innovation that you're talking about and the type of thing that has to happen across the state. And I hope one of the things this task force is going to look at and try to figure out how to make work. And it sounds like we've got some resources and the partnerships to really make that happen.
Are they
now.
able to have it in the school facility, or do they have to have it in a building next door?
No, it's in the school.
Inside, under the same roof.
And matter of fact, to show you how valuable this is, now when they build a new school in Hamilton County, they always build us a room. It's part of, all the new schools have a room for the child care program to support the young teachers, so.
Well, and Phil's model has now become sort of a national model.
It has
And
been, yeah.
It's kind of dubbed micro centers, and you can imagine this sort of
Louis
hub
Stoney
that
has.
is Louis Stoney and after
Louise always puts a title, and she calls them little micro centers.
micro centers.
And it goes back to the consortium concept, Patrick, that you were talking about, to where, you know, you could, sometimes, you know, the need is only maybe a dozen of your staff that really need childcare that's critical, but it makes all the difference in the world. And it communicates to the other staff, too, that the company's wanting to do something to really support the staff and certainly.
Well, if their child doesn't feel well, they can go check on them and then go back.
They go down, yeah, I mean, all those things that mothers do with their children and want to be close to their children is accomplished through that on-site childcare.
Exactly. Okay.
Before we move on, can I just add one
Please.
comment? So, and I'm not jumping to solutioning at all. I think we got some good time before that happens, but I do want to make sure that we talk a lot about adults in this kind of work, but I think it's really important to understand what childcare means to children, especially as like 90% of the human brain forms by age 6. Children who don't make that switch from learning how to read to using reading to learn in 3rd grade have lower rates of high school graduation, are more vulnerable to adult poverty, like all of the neurological and long-term socio-political impacts of childcare that children experience, and they're not the ones who get to sit here and make decisions about what their programming looks like. And so as we move forward as a task force, I want to make sure that, yes, we talk about our adults, yes, our workforce is currently on fire, but our long-term economic needs that prioritize like a knowledge-based economy, that prioritize tech and things like that, if our children don't have what they need going into kindergarten, we have like economic collapse long-term. So I just want to make sure that we talk sufficiently about the children involved in all of this.
And I think, Chloe, our charge here is high-quality, affordable, accessible childcare. And I think that does encumber the waterfront in the discussion. Okay, want to shift here to selecting a couple of folks from this group to serve on our evaluation team. If we don't get anything else accomplished today, we need to get that done, okay? And so I want to invoke the prerogative of the chair and make a request. Phil, your vast experience in this space, I think would add huge value to our being able to select an appropriate consulting team to support. And I would ask if you would be comfortable having your name nominated to be one of these evaluators. I would accept the motion. Okay. Nope, I can't make the motion. So Brooks is making, yeah, there we go. It has been properly moved and seconded that Phil Accord serve as one of our task force members of our evaluation team. Is there any discussion of that motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it, so ordered. And so we want to, Phil needs a partner. Okay? Well, I'm sorry? That's and so in that regard, Chloe, it's my sense that you have been exceedingly engaged in the sort of broad notion of what we're doing here. And I think it would be very helpful to have your knowledge, skills, and ability on that evaluation team. And so if that's something you'd be open to, I would entertain a nomination.
So moved.
Okay. It has been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, so ordered. And so we now have our two folks that will support our evaluation team. And again, the way this will work is once we have the offerings back from the request for proposal, which again, we think we're shooting for it to be on the street in the Thanksgiving timeframe, okay? And based on what Central Procurement tells us for the timeframe that it needs to be on the street, we will then know when we will engage. Once we get those offerings back, we will then convene that evaluation team. That evaluation team will sift through the offerings and make a recommendation to the full task force. Now, please know that if for some reason the task force doesn't concur with the recommendation, we will have one of two choices. One choice is that we could move to the second one on the list. The other is to throw it out and start all over again. Now, no, if we throw it out and start all over again, we're probably adding another 70 or 90 days to the process. Okay, and that would get us very far into the work that we're doing. So, we are going to hope for the best on this, and Phil and Chloe, I think that you guys will be great supporting our DHS team in this. So thanks an awful lot for stepping up and helping us in this regard. We are also supposed to select a first and second vice chair, and as you can imagine, I might have a thought there too. And my thought is, and this will teach them for not being in the room. I think it would be appropriate for the first and second vice chair to be the legislative muscle that created this task force, Representative Hazelwood and Senator Massey. And so I think it would probably be appropriate for us to have this conversation with them before we just conscript them. So if it's okay with the group, I would hold that until our next convening, and we will have a chance to have that conversation with the two of them prior to. Patrick, please.
I don't think that's okay.
Okay.
I'm reading the law.
Shame on you.
The Commissioner of Human Services shall serve as chair and shall call the first meeting of the task force, at which time the members shall elect a first vice chair and second vice chair from among the private sector members, which would seem to preclude
That would.
legislators.
That absolutely would.
But we can make the legislators honorary
But-
co-chairs. How about that?
But you just-
But I guess,
You know, I heard legislators, and I remembered that, you know, those were supposed to be private sector members.
Patrick, thank you so much for that catch. Do we have any thoughts or recommendations for, we have already consumed 2 of our private sector board members in the evaluation part of this. Are there any recommendations for a first vice chair to serve as the first vice chair of the task force?
I'll nominate Blair for first vice chair.
Blair Taylor has been nominated, placed in nomination of the first vice chair for our task force. Is there a second to that motion?
Second that.
It has been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all of those in favor of the nomination of Blair Taylor as first vice chair for our task force signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it, so ordered. Blair Taylor will serve as our first vice chair. And do we have a recommendation for a second vice chair? Again, from our private sector. Chloe, please.
I will recommend Patrick Sheehy.
Superb. Do I have a second for the nomination of Patrick?
second?
Superb. It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of Patrick's nomination as our second vice chair signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing no oppositions, the ayes have it, so ordered. So Blair and Patrick will serve as our first and second vice chairs for our task force. Okay. So we have accomplished today those things which we were required to get accomplished today. We are coming close to our appointed hour to end our engagement today. Are there items that members of the task force would care to share with the broader group? And don't feel compelled to do so, but just.
You're trying to wrap us up.
No, not particularly. I've in having a number of our staff meetings, and when we go around the room, folks feel like they have to share something. Okay, and so I had to make sure that folks realize, I'm not putting you on the spot. It's just if you got something you need to share, let's do so. So.
Commissioner, I was just going to add, you
Please.
had mentioned earlier that we might have a little discussion around putting some definition on scope and actual activities for the consultants. And I would just very eager to sort of hear from this group and have discussions and make sure we're really tapping the experiences and thoughts of every member of this team about what that might entail. I've made some notes for myself and things that I'd like to share, but I'm really also really interested in hearing from the group. And we could do that now, or we could come up with a process for that might make sure we're hearing from everyone, whether it's through some kind of email communications, or we tee it up for the next discussion together.
I want to make sure that we don't stray too far from the legislation. Is pretty clear on the intention of the consultant, and so while I do believe that it's helpful to inform everybody of our thought process on this, I don't want that request for proposal to stray too far from the.
And really, the kinds of things I meant were Patrick, for example, was earlier talking about the kind of sort of analysis, information, data gathering on all the different types of resources that may be in various different departments of government, federally, statewide, that might be a data package. I think we heard today the importance of the sort of, early care and education pipeline of kind of workforce pipeline and really developing a strategy, a very robust strategy around that. And that would entail pulling from a lot of different, Department of Education, higher education, thinking about compensation. There are things that we've talked about in terms of business partnerships today. I can imagine a working group, for example, around business partnerships. We're really thinking about, we're tasking our consultants to go and look at best practices, do a landscape scan, really pull from what we know, package that up, have work groups where we're engaging potential other business partners beyond what's in this group. So I think there are a lot of things that might be helpful for us just to think about as a group. What are the kinds of activities we want to do together? Will we have working groups? That has a lot of implications for scope of a consultant. If they're going to work
And
just
Blair,
with this group versus working.
if I could, I really like to, where you're going with that, because I think that this group is also tasked with making sure that we are using taxpayer dollars efficiently and effectively. And so in saying that, let's find out what we already have in our arsenal that we may not need the task, because I know that Commissioner McCord had just mentioned some of the things that they have available by way of data analytics in the Department of Labor and Workforce. I know that we have things that we have done. So as we talk about these things, I think it's important to also figure out, what do we already have, and does that meet the need, so that we will not be accused of duplicating of efforts. So I think that's important.
And how about this, and Patrick, I'll get to you in just a second. Okay. I think that the scope of the RFP is broad enough that it enables us to include an awful lot of deliverables. And so I think that we have a little bit of time that we could put on our agenda for our next convening, okay? This kind of discussion, so then when we have got a consultant, we can lay out a number of different deliverables that we would like. Patrick, your thought?
Yeah, what I heard in what Blair was saying is, but thinking about the timeline for the consultant, there's no reason that we can't, as a task force or as working groups thereof, start thinking about and maybe coming up with some material that once the consultant is finally hired, and I'm hearing that January could be like the earliest,
Right.
the absolute earliest. That's 11 months before we have to wrap up.
That's right.
Under the statute. Why don't we focus as a task force in the next couple of meetings on providing and developing some organic soup starter,
Exactly.
so that the consultant can kind of hit the ground running and not show up and say, okay, I have to
do you
make
wanna do?
everything from scratch. So
Completely.
I support the notion of how can we sort of organize the thinking, and with a view toward, being able to produce something in each of these, discussions or work groups or sessions or whatever, that the consultant can then kind of take and start with.
So then, I would ask our membership to be prepared for our November meeting, to have this very kind of discussion. And the nature of it is, we want to frame the work of our consultant. And so we should share our thoughts and ideas for the kinds of products that we want the consultant team to produce for us that will better inform our objectives here, okay? So we will add, that will be our principal agenda item for our next, for our November meeting, okay? Other questions, thoughts, comments, stuff you want to yell about before we adjourn for today? Hearing none. Suze, anything else we need to touch on? Okay. So I want to thank everybody. I think that we managed to get through our agenda nicely today, and our work proceeds. And I just want to, again, thank everybody, ask you to be safe and be well, and we will convene in November and move our work forward. So thanks an awful lot. Everybody get home safe.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah, November 9th is there.
And we will be back at the Tennessee Tower for that one. Sorry that we couldn't keep you guys there this time. It was booked, so.
But thank you,
Thanks,
Commissioner
folks.
Cord. This is a great
Thanks,
location.
everyone. Yeah.
Thanks a bunch. Everybody have a good day, the rest of your day.